Today's video is all about participles and their usage. To cover all aspects of participles, the video has become quite long. I would request you to watch the video till the end to have a clear understanding of what are participles, what are participial phrases, what are participial clauses, how participles help in forming tenses, as well as what rules should be kept in mind while using them correctly. If certain parts are known to you, you can skip and move forward, and then continue and complete watching the video to have a good and clear understanding on the subject and thereby enhance your writing skills. Welcome, I'm Seema from Edufinite. If you have any topic related queries, you can ask me in the comment section. Without much ado, let's begin. Now, what is a participle? A participle is a particular form of a verb like close, rise, that expresses a state of being or a physical action. And since it's a participle, it will end either in ing, so the verb close will become closing and rise will become rising. So the verbs that end with ing are called the present participles. They can either end in ing or they can even end in ed or en or d or n or t, like the verb close, which we had taken as an example, that in the ed form will become closed. So here what is happening, closc, so the e is there. So what are we doing? We are just attaching d to it. And then we have rise. It has become risen. So we are attaching only n to it since e is already present in the word rise. So these are all past participles. So we have two participles. One is the present participle that ends in ing, and the past participle for a regular verb will always end with ed or d, whichever is required. Or if it's an irregular verb, then it will either end in en or n or t. So the irregular verb, it's a little different, but for regular verbs, it always ends in ed. And what is the purpose or the role of these participles? Well, and it serves the following purposes. First is, it connects with auxiliary verbs to create different tenses. So we have different tenses like present tense, past tense, future tense. In that also we have variations. Simple present, present continuous or present progressive, present perfect, and so on and so forth. So these tenses, they are formed with the help of these participles, and these participles alone can't form the tenses. They have to take the help of the auxiliary verbs and then form the tenses. Next, these participles, other than forming tenses, also function as an adjective. That means, what does an adjective do? It modifies a noun or a pronoun present in the sentence, and since it looks like a verb and it does not function like a verb, it just looks like a verb but functions as an adjective, in those cases where it looks like a verb but does not perform the function of a verb, we call them verbals. So it is also known as verbals, having the looks of a verb. The next is, it can also be used as the beginning of an adverbial phrase. Now, we'll look into the examples to understand whatever we have studied till now, to understand it better. Okay, before we move on to the examples, we'll just have an idea of the participle forms of the verb. The different forms of the verb. So, since we have chosen the two verbs close and rise, so these are the base form of the verbs. That's also known as the V1 form of the verb. Now, When we have the S form, that means for the third person singular, we use the verbs with an S. So it's closes and rises. Okay, now the past form, when we use it in the past, simple past sentences, it's ed for a regular verb, since close is a regular verb, so it's closed, and rise is an irregular verb, so it's rose, rise, rose, risen. So these are the three forms. And close is of course a regular verb, so it will be close, 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 the three forms of the verb. Okay, now this form of the verb is known as the V2 form of the verb, or the second form of the verb. Now after the past form, we come to the present participle form. This is the place of our focus. We are focusing in this. The other forms I've just mentioned so that you have a clear concept, but we have to focus in the participle forms. So the present participle form is, as I told you earlier, is formed by adding ing to the verb. So close, of course, E is there, we have to remove the E, and ing. Similar, rise, E is there, we remove the E and add ing. So close becomes closing and rise becomes rising. The next is the past participle form. That is also the focus area in our topic. So the past participle form, as I told you, either if it's a regular verb, it will have an ending of ed, or if it has an e at the end, so only d, or en, or n, or t, if those are irregular verbs. So as close is a regular verb, so its past participle form is also closed. And rise, the base form of the verb was rise. The past participle form, or the V3 form of rise, is risen. Okay, now just keep these things in mind and let's move forward and look into the examples to understand them better. Now let's look into the present participle usage. Over here, see, I have highlighted the auxiliaries with blue and the participles with yellow. And for your better understanding, I have again, for present participles, it's ing. So I have written ing in red. And for the past participles, if it's ed or n or d or whatever it is, I have written that in red. So here, I am closing the door now. Now, am, closing. So am is the auxiliary and closing is the present participle. So these together help us to form the present progressive tense or the present continuous tense. Okay, the next one. Look, the sun is rising. So yes, it's looking beautiful. The sun is rising. So here also we have chosen two verbs, close and rise. So we'll be using them in our sentences to have a clear understanding of how the form changes and what auxiliaries we attach to form the various tenses. So, look, the sun is rising. So, this is again is an ing, that is the present progressive or the present continuous tense. Okay, the next one is we move on to the past progressive or past continuous tense. So, here the auxiliary will change. We will use was, and of course, since this is progressive, so we will be using the present participle. So I was closing the door when she came. So was closing. Our focus area is was closing. Was is the auxiliary, closing is the present participle. So this is how past progressive or past continuous tense is formed. Okay, the next one. I will be closing the door from tomorrow. So this is future progressive or future continuous tense, and here the auxiliary is will be, and of course since it's a progressive or continuous tense, so we are using the present participle. So will be closing, I will be closing. Okay, next, I have been closing the door since last week. So here again, see, we have chosen different auxiliaries and we have used the same present participle, but the tense here has changed to present perfect progressive tense or present perfect continuous tense. So what have we included? The auxiliaries from am has been changed to have been. So the tense from present progressive has changed to present perfect progressive. Okay, the next one. I had been closing the door for past 2 days. So again, see, since this is past, so have has been replaced by had. So had been closing. So this has become, we have chosen the auxiliaries had been and of course our present participle closing. So this becomes the past perfect progressive tense or past perfect continuous tense. Okay, the next one is, I will have been working in Seoul for more than 3 years by the time I leave for Hong Kong. So what happened? See, from progressive tense, we have changed it to future perfect progressive tense or future perfect continuous tense. By changing the auxiliary from will be, we have changed it to will have been. So, I will have been working in Seoul for more than 3 years by the time I leave for Hong Kong. So, this is how we change the tenses with the help of the auxiliary and the participles. So, we use either the present participle or the past participle and thereby attaching them to the auxiliaries. This is how we make the tenses. Next we come to look at the closing gates at the border. Now closing gates, so we are telling more about the gates which we are trying to tell someone to look at. So what is the gates doing? The gates closing. So closing here, in spite of the fact that it looks like a verb, it's the present participle form of close. Yes, but here it is not acting like a verb. What is it doing? It is telling us more about the noun, gates. So if anything tells us more about the noun, what is its function? It's the adjective. Yes, closing here is the adjective, though it looks like a verb, but it is functioning as an adjective and telling us more about the gates. Okay, next we have look at the rising sun. What sun? Rising sun. So this word rising, it is telling us more about the sun. Sun is the noun. So it is telling us more about the sun. So this, though rising looks like a verb, it's not behaving like a verb. It's behaving as an adjective, telling us more about the noun sun. So rising and closing over here are the verbals. They act as adjectives, of course, they function as adjectives, and so they are also known as verbals because they look like verbs but do not function like a verb. The next one is, the third function is, Mira spent the whole day studying science. So what do we see? Studying is the present participle. Now, the word studying, what is it trying to do? It is trying to tell us how Mira spent her time. So spent, that's the verb. So it's telling us more about verb spent. So since this is telling us studying science is telling us more about the verb spent, so this is the adverbial phrase. So as I told you, adverbial phrases begin with participle, present participle. Now, let's move on to past participle usage. Now, the examples. I have closed the door. See, here again, what has happened? We have changed the auxiliary. So, the auxiliary over here is have. Have closed, ed. So, we are using the past participle over here. With the help of past participle and the auxiliary have, we have formed the present perfect tense. So, with present participle, we had formed the progressive or the continuous tense and the perfect progressive or the perfect continuous tense. And with the help of past participles, we will form the perfect tense as well as in perfect continuous tense, they will play a role. So, we'll come to that a little later. First, let's focus into the perfect tense. So, for present perfect tense, what is happening? We are using the auxiliary have and the past participle closed, and this is how we form the present perfect tense. Okay, the next one is the sun has risen. See, this is past participle of the word rise. So we have chosen the past participle of the word rise and have attached has, since sun is singular. So this way we form the present perfect tense. Okay, now the next one. I wish I had closed the door earlier. So had closed. So we are using the auxiliary had, and here it's past participle ed. So closed, we are forming the past perfect tense. So for the present, we had have closed or has closed or has risen and have risen. And for the past form, it is had closed. Now, for the future, we will have to say, she will have closed the door by now. So will have. So the auxiliaries are will have. See how we change the auxiliaries and we have the same participle. But with the help of the different auxiliaries, the different tenses are being created. Okay. She will have closed the door by now is future perfect tense. Okay. The next one. I have been closing the door since last week. So in this, yes, when we were focusing on present perfect continuous tense, we were focusing earlier in the ing part, closing. But here we are focusing in have been. So while forming the perfect progressive tense or the perfect continuous tense, we have to take help of both the present participle as well as the past participle. And of course, we have to have the auxiliary too. So here the auxiliaries have and the participle, past participle is been. It is the past participle of the verb be. And of course, closing is the present participle of the verb close. So this is how we form the present perfect continuous tense or present perfect progressive tense. Okay. I couldn't answer the phone as I had been closing the door then. So here see, had been closing. So had is the auxiliary, been is the past participle of the verb be, and of course closing is the present participle of the verb close. So this is how we form the past perfect progressive or past perfect continuous tense. Okay, the next one. She will have been closing the door for more than 2 hours by the time I reach past midnight. So yes, by the time I will reach home past midnight, so 2 hours before that, she will have been closing the door. So that's future perfect progressive tense or future perfect continuous tense. So here, the auxiliaries are will have, and been is the past participle and closing is the present participle. So I guess now you've understood that present progressive or present continuous, I shouldn't say present, past and future, of course. It is the progressive or the continuous tense, the perfect tense as well as the perfect progressive or perfect continuous tense are formed with the help of either the present participle or the past participle and the different auxiliaries. Okay, next, look at the closed gates of the border. So here, what have we done? We have changed here, we have used the past participle. So here, what is happening? Close, the word closed, though it looks like a verb, it's not acting as a verb. It is telling us more about the gate. It has already been closed. So, what is it? It is an adjective because it is telling us more about the verb noun. The gate has been closed, so the gate's closed. So, closed gate is an adjective. The word closed or the past participle closed is an adjective and is modifying the noun gate. Now, look at the risen sun. So, again, see, here we have used the past participle of the verb rise, risen. Look at the risen sun. So, here what does it mean? The sun has already risen. That time, if you use a present, look at the rising sun, that means the action is continuing. Look at the rising sun. Okay, there is the rising sun, that is also describing the sun, rising, the word rising, and risen sun is also describing the word sun. But here the difference is that time the sun was just rising and here it has already risen. That means it's already completed the action of rising. So we are using risen, but it's used as an adjective. So that's what you have to understand. Okay, next is, what is participial phrase? Now we've completed participles, a single word. Those are participles. We've completed them. They are either used to form tenses with the help of auxiliaries, or they are used as adjectives to describe nouns and are called verbals, or sometimes the present participle is used at the beginning of the adverbial phrase. So that's how they are used. That's their usage. Now let's focus into the participial phrase. Now a participial phrase is a group of words. Since it's a phrase, so naturally it will be a group of words consisting of a participle. Since this is a participial phrase, so it will have a participle, of course. It can be either present or past participle, and other parts of speech like nouns, adjectives, adverbs, or prepositional phrases. So it can be either any of it along with the participle, and they form the participial phrase. So a participial phrase is a group of words that will consist of a participle, definitely, and along with it, since it's a group of words, it can have a noun, it can have an adjective or an adverb or a prepositional phrase. At the minimum, the participial phrase consists of participle and an object. So minimum, it has to have two words. So the participle will be there and it will have an object, like say sipping coffee. I like sipping coffee. So sipping coffee, here what is happening? Sipping is the participle and coffee is its object. So two words, they form the participial phrase. Because why is it participial phrase? We'll come to that a little later. And what is its function? It functions like an adjective and modifies the noun or a pronoun of that sentence. Now, these phrases function like an adjective. Since they function like an adjective, what will they do? They'll modify a noun or a pronoun beside which they are placed in a sentence. So it is an adjectival phrase too. So a participle phrase is also an adjectival phrase because it tells us more about the noun or the pronoun of that sentence. You have to note this, why we call it participial phrase. When words are added to participles, they are called participial phrases because participle is one word and to make a phrase you need other words. So the other words are not participles. They can be, as I told you, noun, adjective, adverb or prepositional phrases. Hence, they together, they form the participial phrase. We do sometimes call them participle phrase, but we actually should call them participial phrase since they have one participle, but the other words are not participles. Together, they form the participle phrase. Let's look into the usage of the participle phrases. So let's look into the example. Sipping coffee, Joy read the newspaper. So who was sipping coffee? Joy. Joy is the noun and sipping coffee is telling us more about that noun Joy. What is Joy doing? She's sipping coffee. So you see that the participle phrase over here is functioning as an adjective. So it is also an adjectival phrase. Rita served us sandwiches crammed with cheese. So here, crammed with cheese is a participle phrase. Why is it participle phrase? Because see, crammed, we have the past participle here. Sipping, ing, that was the present participle. Here, crammed, ed is the past participle. With that, we have with cheese. So, crammed with cheese is the participle phrase. And this phrase is telling us more about the sandwiches. What type of sandwiches? Crammed with cheese. So, this phrase, crammed with cheese, it is acting as an adjective telling us more about the noun sandwiches. Okay, the next one. We do not know the person wearing the black coat. So, which person? Wearing the black coat. So, that's the description of the person wearing the black coat. So, that is the participle phrase because Wearing is the present participle present in that phrase, and that phrase is telling us more about the noun person. So, person is a noun, hence this is acting as an adjective. Okay, next. The boy drawing the portrait is my cousin. So, drawing the portrait, this is the adjectival phrase. Again, yes, this is the adjectival phrase. Why? Because this is describing about the boy. Okay, the boy. Which boy? The boy drawing the portrait. But drawing is the present participle. So, this is a participial phrase. Okay, because if we say the boy is my cousin will not make sense. The boy drawing the portrait is my cousin. Okay, now whistling a melodious tune is telling us about Jerry. What is Jerry doing? Whistling a melodious tune. So, whistling a melodious tune is a participial phrase because it begins with the present participle whistling, and it's telling us about the noun Jerry. What is Jerry doing? Whistling a melodious tune. Next we have is walking on the trail. So, you can see here is walking. So, what is it doing? Is walking is the present participle, but it has been associated with the auxiliary is. So, with the help of auxiliary is, what is it doing? It is telling us the tense of that particular sentence. And what tense is it? It is present progressive or present continuous tense. Next we have participle phrases and dangling modifiers. Okay, so what is dangling modifier? A participle phrase must be placed close to the noun or pronoun it modifies, and the noun must be clearly stated to avoid confusion. Because these words are describing about a particular noun. So, if you don't place it properly beside the noun it is describing, then there might be a confusion. You might be wondering, how can that be? Well, just a second. Look at the sentence and then you'll understand. Flying out of the window, Meena grabbed the notes. So, what does this mean? Flying, it means, like if you just look at this sentence, you'll feel that Meena is flying out of the window, But it doesn't mean that. Meena is not going to fly out of the windows. The notes are flying out of the windows and Meena has grabbed them. So, we have misplaced the participle phrase, and since this is misplaced, so a confusion is created, and this type of misplacement is known as dangling modifiers. Okay, now how do we correct the sentence? Here it is. Flying out of the window, the notes were grabbed by Meena. See? Flying out of the windows, the notes. So, here we understand the notes, that is the noun that is modified by the participle phrase flying out of the window. So, the notes were flying out of the window and were grabbed by Meena. So, this is how you should write your modifiers very carefully. Otherwise, there will be some confusion with the dangling modifiers. So, keep in mind, dangling modifiers, don't use them. Next, we come to the punctuation of the participle phrases. So, that is also very important. I've touched all the points, hence the video is becoming a little long, but have patience. You'll get a clear idea about what participles are all about. So, have patience and watch it till the end. Okay, now the punctuation of the participle phrases. Well, when a sentence begins with a participle phrase, a comma should be placed after the phrase. So, if the participle phrase is before, it's at the beginning of the sentence, and then we have the rest of the sentence following, rest of the words following. So, you have to separate the participle phrase from the rest of the sentence by putting a comma at the end of that particular participle phrase. So, let's look into the example. Reaching home, I realized I had left my key in the office. So, reaching home, after reaching home, that means that's the participle phrase. So, here I've placed it right at the beginning. So I've put a comma after it and then written the whole sentence. Next we have when a participle phrase comes in the middle of a sentence. It should be separated by a comma only if the information provided by it is additional and not essential to the meaning of the sentence. So, otherwise, what will happen? No comma should be used. So, if the participle phrase that you're inserting in the middle of a sentence is an additional information about the noun, it's not required. Without that additional information also, if you don't put in that additional information, the sentence gives its complete meaning. Like that's just an additional information. So if it's an additional information, you have to put a comma at the beginning of that particular participle phrase and also at the end of it. But if that piece of information in the middle of the sentence is an integral part of that sentence, then you are not supposed to put any comma and separate it out. Only if it's an additional information, then you separate it out by putting two commas, one at the beginning and one at the end. So let's look into the example to understand it clearly. The monument destroyed by a storm was never built. So the monument was never built. That's the main idea of the sentence. But we have provided an additional information. Why was the monument, never built? It was destroyed by a storm. So, monument destroyed by a storm was never built. So, since this is an additional information, you see after the monument I've put a comma and destroyed by a storm, that's the participle phrase. I've again put a comma so as to make people understand that this is an additional piece of information. This is not the integral part of the sentence. Without this part, the whole sentence stands. The monument was never built. It gives us the meaning. So let's look into the other sentence. The student earning the highest grade will be awarded. So if we say the student will be awarded, which student? It does not give us the whole idea. So we have to include, this is an integral part of the sentence. This participle phrase is very much required by the sentence to complete its meaning. So the student earning the highest grade will be awarded. So will be awarded. So here we have not separated it by commas, since this is an integral part of the sentence. The third one is, if a participle phrase comes at the end of the sentence, a comma normally precedes the phrase. If it modifies an earlier word, since it functions as an adjective, so it will be modifying a noun. So if it modifies a word earlier in the sentence, then what will happen? You'll have to put a comma before starting the phrase at the end of the sentence. Otherwise, no comma should be used if the phrase is directly after the word it modifies, okay? So if it's directly after the noun that it is modifying, when it's placed at the end of the sentence, you're not to put any comma. But if it is modifying some noun which is much earlier, because after that there is again another noun. So to specify that you are modifying the noun that has been mentioned earlier, so you put a comma. Let's look into the example to understand. John nervously looked at his partner, alarmed by her scream. So, who was alarmed? Not his partner. John was alarmed. So, since alarmed by her scream, this participle phrase is telling us or modifying the noun John, which is placed before the noun the partner. Hence, we have to put a comma before the beginning of this participle phrase. So we write John nervously looked at his partner and then put a comma and then write the phrase alarmed by her scream. Okay, now if the sentence is, we often see this man wandering through a locality. So wandering through a locality is telling us about this man, this man. So it's placed beside the noun that it is modifying, though it's at the end of the sentence, but it is placed right beside the noun it is modifying. So you don't have to put any commas. But in the previous sentence where we read, John nervously looked at his partner, alarmed by her scream. Because alarmed by her scream is modifying the noun John, which is way before the noun the partner. So to differentiate or to eliminate any confusion that alarmed by her scream is describing John, so we put a comma. And that's how we separate. So this is how the punctuation works in participial phrases. Next we come to what is participial clause. Okay. A participial clause in a sentence is a shortened dependent clause which begins with a participle. So it's a dependent clause. That means it won't be able to give the whole idea on its own. It will have to depend on an independent clause to give the complete idea. But that dependent clause is shortened and it begins with the participle. Okay, next. Participial clauses are non-finite clauses, that is, contains a verb. Participle, naturally the verb is the participle. It can be the present or the past or perfect participle that does not show tense. Since it's non-finite, so it will not show the tense. Now again, participial clauses are commonly used in written English. Why is it normally used in written English? Because they help to pack in additional information without complicating or elongating the sentence. So since dependent clauses are cut short, so the sentences don't get elaborate, but with the help of these participial clauses, we can pack in more information about the nouns that we try to modify. Okay, so let's look into the usage. So we can use participial clauses when the participle, present, past or perfect, and the verb in the main clause have the same subject. So that's the important criteria. Because we are shortening the dependent clause, so the verb in the main clause as well as the participle of the dependent clause will have the same subject. They cannot have different subjects. So that's an important. They are commonly used after a preposition or a conjunction. So again, either they can be used as a shortened dependent clause or they can also be used after a conjunction or after a preposition. For example, realizing her mistake, she quickly admitted it. It can be as she realized her mistake, she quickly admitted it. So realizing her mistake, we have shortened it. By shortening the dependent clause, what have we done? We have used the participle at the beginning. Realizing her mistake, she admitted it. So here, who realized? She realized. So the subject is common, she. Next, the grenade exploded, destroying the area. So here, the common subject is the grenade. We are talking about the grenade that exploded and it has also destroyed that area. That grenade has destroyed that area. So destroying the area is the participial clause. So it can be the grenade exploded and has destroyed the area. So instead of doing that, we have shortened it and we have said the grenade exploded, destroying the area. The meaning is the same. After searching for quite some time, I found my keys. Yes. So see here, what have we done? We have used it, yes, after the conjunction after. Okay. So after is the conjunction and we have used the present participle after it. And this is the searching for quite some time is the participle clause. I found my keys. On arriving at the airport, so again, see, the participle clause is arriving at the airport. Here on is the preposition and we have used the participle arriving, present participle arriving just after it. So on arriving at the airport, Roma headed towards the security checking counter. Frightened by the noise, the baby woke up. So again here we have used the past participle. Frightened by the noise, the baby woke up. Frightened by the noise, this is telling us about the baby. It's describing about the noun baby. So this is a participial clause. Okay. Now, filled with pride, he collected his medal. Okay. This is again the past participle. Filled with pride, he collected his medal. Next. Having eaten my dinner, I denied the chocolate. So someone was offering me chocolate, but of course, I did not want to eat the chocolate. So, having eaten my dinner. So that's the perfect participle. When do we use this perfect participle? We use this perfect participle when we try to relate, one action has been completed before the other action. So, having eaten my dinner, I've completed eating my dinner when I was offered the chocolate, so I denied it. That's how perfect participle clauses are used. They are used to show that the action they describe was finished before the action in the main clause. So in the main clause, I denied the chocolate. Why did I deny the chocolate? Because I've already eaten the dinner. So having eaten my dinner, I denied the chocolate. Okay. So that's all for today. Hope the lesson was useful. Let me know your thoughts about it in the comment section. I'll be soon back with a new video. Till then, take care, stay safe, and be happy.